Cyber season is in full swing with our pals Isotope and Native Instruments.
Get huge discounts on everything from Guitar Rig 7,
Complete 14 bundles,
and one of our favorites here at the Cult and Culture Podcast,
Ozone 11 EQ. Go to isotope.com
and nativeinstruments.com
to feast on the audio goodness. Yum.
You can also get additional savings on other softwares by using the code
RUIN10.
DistroKid now also has a motherfucking app. The DistroKid app is available for iOS and Android. You can download it at distrokid.com/app/, or you can get it in the App Store.
Welcome to episode 13 of the Cult and Culture Podcast. This episode features Lucien Greaves, the head of the Satanic Temple. This is probably one of the more insane, in-depth, just, I don't know, like, out there, like, I didn't think we would be doing this, and we did it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so if we have Satan's right-hand man on our podcast, what's next?
I think this will probably be our last podcast. You want to explain how this all came about?
Yeah, so someone hit me up or tipped me off to a post, I think it was like a top 5 like spooky songs curated by Lucien.
Like a Halloween playlist kind of, right?
Yeah, I think it might have been, and had Dead Cross on it, and I was like, wow, this is awesome, because I had recently seen Hail Satan, the film, which I totally recommend seeing. I'm an atheist, and it made me want to go join the temple. But yeah, so I posted it online, and then somehow there was a little bit of dialogue between him and I, and I was like, dude, let's get you on one of our podcasts. And a few days later, we were on a plane out to Salem.
Salem, yep.
I don't know. Without further ado,
yep, here it is.
Here it is.
Ironically, episode 13.
I think I just reached that level where people feel like I'm reliable enough to endorse the agents. You know what I mean? Like they I don't know. Like people who see like the work we do,
Sure.
And the fact that I do go out and consistently give lectures and things like that. I think just knowing that people follow up is a big thing. You know what I mean?
Oh, of course. But maybe it's like a lot of like if someone's like I guess in a musical perspective, they're like, hey, there's this band so and so, and you're like a promoter or a booking agent's like, I don't know who the fuck that is, or like, hey, there's this band. Oh yeah, I've heard of them. So like as long as like people, I'm sure like the film coming out, people are like, oh shit, they're legit. Like that guy can definitely go and speak at our event or whatever.
Yeah. I have to hand it to like some of the early invitations I got,
Yeah.
like American Atheists and stuff like that. There was like real concern over who we were,
Whoa.
Well, people were worried that we trashed the hotel room or what the Satanists would do coming there. This was early years. All they knew was that Satanists were on the scene, and then they were, and I didn't have a proven track record speaking either, so I had to hand it to like the early organizers who were like, yeah, come on in and do this thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of anti-theists too that was involved in the atheist community who don't like religion at all, like any religion, even one that is pretty much there to like combat other religions that overstep their boundaries.
Yeah, when I spoke at American Atheists, there was something like the pink mask thing. Like you didn't see like some of those early reactions that wasn't part of the film, but like we got angry messages from like people in the gay community who were like, we don't need people looking at us now as Satanists and all of that.
I've been called a Satanist my whole life.
Yeah, for being gay or whatever, and like that was kind of confusing to me. It's like, well, fuck you. Then like we're doing this as Satanists, and there's a lot of gay Satanists. So you are or you aren't.
Yeah,
not
sure.
Saying like everybody is one thing. I just didn't. We don't get that anymore, and I think it's because people are realizing more and more that we're not just this kind of like, transient prank that's just kind of coming through
sure.
or whatever. like we do identify as Satanists or whatever, and we're not sending a message like, you know, gay rights is satanic or whatever, you know. So we don't really hear that criticism anymore.
Sure.
You know, as we keep doing what we're doing, we kind of change like the dialogue in certain ways.
That's
Hey,
okay.
are we going?
Yeah, I'm just
Okay. Right, sure.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, that
I'm
is
just
it.
testing it, so it's good.
Okay, so that like my whole idea was like, okay, let's start at square one. You know, like I mean, I don't even know what square one actually really is, but you kind of, even today when we were hanging out, you had sort of mentioned like the Church of Satan and how they were like not into what you were doing, right? Like,
yeah.
or I mean, whoever's left from it, right? Because it's dissolved and
It's pretty much just the Twitter feed now. Like, they you know, Anton LaVey wrote the Satanic Bible, had an active organization, congregation going in like the 60s, I guess. Kind of fell apart in the 70s. Wouldn't still be a thing now if it weren't for the internet. And now they have a Twitter feed. And to be fair, they wouldn't like us no matter what we were doing. You know, you'll always see them saying that what we're doing is unsatanic. We could be doing the exact opposite. They'd still say the same thing, because at the end of the day, they simply believe they're the only ones who have the right to call themselves Satanists. And at least they'll admit to that, because they, you know, they're pretty open about the fact that they will not recognize any other satanic group as satanic, because their idea is that LaVey codified Satanism with the Satanic Bible, and anything that deviates from that can't be considered properly satanic, because LaVey is the origin of Satanism in their minds, and the codification of Satanism exists only within the Satanic Bible, and that's what it is. So they're kind of LaVeyan fundamentalists, right? So any way you cut it, they're going to be against it. Whatever it is, they're against it.
So what do you think about the Satanic
They're
Bible?
like satanic Christians.
They're the gatekeepers of Satanism.
Yeah. What do you think about the Satanic Bible? Is that too big of a question?
No, I mean, I read it when I was in high school, you know, and it was more about it being the Satanic Bible, you know what I mean, than it was that it was a great literary work, you know. And I feel like there's these kind of core ideals in the Satanic Bible of like personal independence and autonomy that, to me, kind of translated into a more kind of, I think, a liberal perspective than the Church of Satan went into, because, you know, if you take Satan as like this icon for the rebel against tyranny, it doesn't make sense to me the direction the Church of Satan went when they advocate for authoritarian politics, which they absolutely do. They're openly authoritarian, and even when we contested them on this one time, they said that they're proud of it. You know, that's the angle they take. And to me, that kind of runs contrary to the whole kind of Milton perspective of the Paradise Lost kind of Satan, or the rebel against tyranny, even though they still kind of try to incorporate that, at least rhetorically in certain ways. But
Do you think so? Like they do that now, as you said, like as a Twitter feed. But do you think like when Anton LaVey was part of it?
Oh no! As a Twitter feed, you'd think they're pretending to be us. Like you won't hear much mention of authoritarian politics or anything of the type. It's very much about it's very libertarian on the Twitter feed, and it'll talk about freedom of choice and that kind of thing. And they really don't go into that territory. But LaVey wrote very explicitly about authoritarian police state politics and things like that. But the thing is like, there's certain things I give people a pass on as being a product of their time.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And like I think LaVey was definitely reacting to the situation in the United States between like the 70s and 90s, and crime, social ills, they were really bad. You know, sociologists still look over that time period and try to figure out what caused that. You know, a lot of the cities were war zones, and LaVey's feeling, you know, as kind of an older eccentric hermit, was that, you know, there needed to be some kind of police state politics to rein it all in. And you can see that kind of apocalyptic mindset in a lot of the culture of the 80s, like the kind of revenge porn, action movies, and things like that. There was an idea that things were getting worse and just weren't going to get better, and that the only rational solution was, you know, larger police forces, martial law almost kind of thing. And so, I think now we can kind of look at the data and see that kind of LaVey was very much an advocate for social Darwinist politics. And he deracialized the social Darwinist politics, but the idea was meritocracy, that the strong triumph over the weak, and that the individual took primacy over anything else, and that kind of Nietzschean perspective that sympathy was a byproduct of weakness and other types of things. Like altruism wasn't a reality. That silly argument that because it makes you feel good to do it, then it's not true altruism, which makes you wonder, like, when was wanting something as a motivating factor something that nullifies it? I don't know. But in any case, I just don't feel like there was necessarily the kind of evidence we have now to dispute those notions back in LaVey's time.
Yeah.
At the very least, I like to think that at his best, he was trying to take a scientific perspective on social problems. He was wrong. I like to give him the benefit of the doubt and think that maybe if he could look at the world today, look at where the evidence was, maybe he'd adjust his opinion. And actually, I met some people who were friends with LaVey.
Yeah.
And they feel that he would have. They feel that at a certain level he was a very liberal and progressive guy, but there was just the terror of the social circumstances at the time. So, but who knows? He is dead. I just feel like it's a shame that some of his followers can't follow more in principle rather than follow the letter of the law to its contradictory conclusion.
But what about the fact that, to me, when I look at it, I guess it just seems like the Church of Satan had so much, it was almost like comical, or like it didn't, I don't know, like there was like so many goofy aspects to it, which is like, that's not going to really help your message or your fight.
That's what's strange. Well, you have a bunch of people now who identify with the Church of Satan who say that they've been defending this tradition of Satanism for 50 years, and they don't seem to know the history of their own organization at all, because they look at some of the things we do and say, like, oh, we're just out there trying to provoke and piss off Christians, or that we're just hot topic goth kids or whatever. And it's like, well, we could very easily look at them and say the same types of things.
I think the complete opposite.
Yeah.
I mean, even especially from like what the film portrayed, it would just seem like, man, these people like are really taking this to like a democratic, socially, politically aware level than like with the Church of Satan just seemed like kind of just like a campy, I don't know.
Oh yeah.
Bad.
But that's fine. I mean, the theater is fine. The like community aspects of the ritual, when people have fun wearing their capes and horns or whatever, or in some kind of contained environment, more power to them. But I mean, to be fair, it's not just the Church of Satan that can ignore the deeper aspects of the Satanic Temple. We have a really difficult time sometimes getting media to pay attention to some of our more highbrow campaigns, that are more well thought issues in our approaches to them. Like, people know generally that we're fighting reproductive rights litigation, but we put out press releases about that. It doesn't get the kind of bites that those real contentious headlines like Satan is putting up a monument in park or whatever. Yeah, those are the ones, and then those articles tend to talk about our non-theism as though that's just evidence that we're clever pranksters. Sure. We don't really believe, they're not really Satanists, is kind of like the subtext, if not stated explicitly sometimes in these articles, which does us a real disservice. But when we talk about like our Gray Faction campaign, which I think I mentioned earlier, you had never even heard of because we hardly get any press attention on this at all. But we have a whole segment of the Satanic Temple of people who work really hard on fighting back against pseudoscience, and particularly pseudoscience within the mental health industry that goes towards some of the issues that that were relevant in the Satanic Panic. You know, in the mental health field, that was a group of therapists, psychologists, mental health professionals who were advocating for the notion of repressed trauma, and not just repressed trauma as an existing condition, but as something that can be drawn forth. The memories could be brought to consciousness through the right kind of therapy, whether it be hypnosis, sodium amytal, interviews, guided imagery therapy sessions, that kind of thing, where people are told that these kinds of imaginings of theirs, or these hypnotic stream of consciousness thoughts in which they're trying to resurface repressed memories of abuse, were actually true. And for the most part, we found, if not in all cases, that these recollections are confabulations that have no basis in reality. It's the same evidentiary basis for alien abduction, past lives. You can get people to believe things that just aren't true through this kind of method of making them create memories. And so we've been trying to, fight back against the therapists who still spread conspiracy theories and delusions to clients, mentally vulnerable clients of theirs. And some of these therapists go out in conferences and they'll talk about Illuminati mind control, satanic ritual abuse, like really 1980s satanic panic shit that's been totally and thoroughly debunked. And it's horrifying because, people are coming to them to get a better grounding in reality. And you have people who are vulnerable, maybe went through traumatic events and are trying to get that kind of grounding, and they're being sold crippling delusions, right? And there's very little oversight about that. Anyways, my point is, we've done a ton of work on trying to reveal this problem, and we've been filing complaints against different therapists and trying to fight back against conspiracy theorists, being able to offer continuing education units at conferences and things like that, and we just don't get press coverage on that. Nobody really talks about it, and I think there's a certain plateau we need to reach. There's a certain new level the Satanic Temple needs to reach in credibility, where people stop wanting us to be this clever, hilarious prank and start accepting us for doing real, credible activist work and trying to make changes that go beyond just making people think about their own hypocrisy, because we've been clear from the start we have our own affirmative values. People feel like we're always pretending to be like the other guy so we can put a mirror on them. But we don't always do that. We don't always just mimic the Christian tactics. Like, people write to us all the time, well, can we discriminate against people coming to our businesses because they're Christian? It's like, why would you want to do that? Why do we want to increase the discrimination game? You know what I mean?
Sure.
Let's go back to people learning to live together and do things in a rational manner, and let's set up an environment where we can better get along rather than each trying to, fight fire with fire.
So, let's say that situation happens where there's like a Christian that wants to, I don't know, how would they encounter you, and what would it entail? Like, what would happen?
Like, if we wanted to discriminate against
no, like, no, if you don't, no, like the opposite of that, like embracing each other and like working together on something, or at least like getting your ideals out to, sharing them and kind of coming to like some sort of like, I guess, place of harmony where you can coexist. Is that something that you would want to achieve, I guess?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, we don't, it would just be juvenile if we were developing our own affirmative values based on just doing the opposite of what we think the other side is doing.
Sure.
Like, if they change their values, then we change our values just to oppose them.
But not maybe the opposite, because, we both know that, like, Christianity is wrong. So, it's just, so it's not like, this is like the opposite, but you're just like, you're, I don't know. Like, to me, it's like, I would want to embrace that person and be like, let's just coexist and maybe we'll learn from each other, or,
I think Christianity is only wrong insofar as Satanism is wrong, where it's like, if you take it from a theistic perspective, you're engaging in magical thinking, and like I've said before, and I put it in writing because I feel like I want that on record publicly, that I stated it before it happened, but I see these kinds of religions academics talking about the future of religion, and I see them speculating about, on the horizon, we're going to see non-theistic religions, and it infuriates me because I'm thinking, like, you're willfully ignoring us. Non-theistic religion has already arrived, right? This is like the primary, I think, American-based non-theistic religion right now. I think what they're waiting for is there's going to be some progressive Christian sect that gains some kind of popularity. It's going to be a non-theistic Christian group, and then they're going to act like non-theistic religion has been invented, and now it's arrived, and it's going to get it's going to get the applause of the masses, and people are going to say this is where it's at. And I tend to think that a non-theistic Christian group will have no beef with us, but I think that's what's really gonna, and they're going to be no more wrong than us, is what I'm saying. You know what I mean? If they're non-theistic and they're just taking these kinds of principles and values and saying, like, this Christ story is kind of a metaphor for what we believe or whatever, then whatever.
Yeah. I mean, it does seem like a sort of an evolution to some extent. I mean, I guess there's like the Rock Church, which is like a bunch of hipster Christians, but I'm like, they still hate homosexuals. They still say it's like, wrong, or
no, they're just they're just like the cool guy.
Yeah, you're like,
cool
cool, you have tattoos and shit. Like, cool.
Where you're like the older guy who goes into high school and turns your chair backwards and sits down.
So that,
hey teens.
Okay, so that's the
I
Rock.
used to be like you.
Yeah.
Whatever it was, I did it.
Yeah.
I should be dead or in jail. All the tropes.
So where did, if you don't mind, can you explain how you fell into all of this? Like, is that too crazy of a story or long of a story? But I would love to know where you found it. This place.
Like how I came to be in the position I'm in now.
Maybe not structurally with the temple, but just your own beliefs.
Oh yeah, I mean, The thing is, I say I was deeply affected by the Satanic Panic, and people expect that means I was accused of cannibalism or something, or thrown in jail for playing Dungeons and Dragons or whatever. None of that happened, and I never really saw directly when I was a kid people's lives being destroyed by the Satanic Panic, but I was really aware of it. I was really aware that there was supposed to be Satanists in each community, and they were murdering babies, and they had mobile crematoriums, and that there were these sick cults, and they were everywhere. I mean, the conspiracy theory was mainstreamed, At the time, Grohl was running these stories, and Sally Jesse Raphael, and Oprah. Let's not forget, and she's Teflon, more so than any of the, She promoted the book Michelle Remembers, which really kind of kicked off the Satanic Panic. It was supposed to be a true story of a woman who recovered her memories of being abused by a satanic cult, and she was a Catholic, and her therapist was a Catholic, so she recovers memories of the Archangel Michael actually coming down, appearing to her, and fighting Satan, and Jesus Christ comes and removes the scars of her abuse, which also conveniently kind of took away any evidence that she had, suffered, having parts hacked off of her or whatever else was supposed to have happened. Anyways, these stories were taken as fact. I was small enough where I didn't realize how wrong mainstream authorities could be on certain issues. So there's these terrifying stories. So what's the truth of that? Kind of forgot about it a while, and then I came back to the topic, and I started trying to find out who were Satanists, was there anything accurate about this, or were people who identified as Satanists, were they doing any of these things, or were they doing some of them? What was it? So I started kind of going around, and I really, as I grew up too, I began to see the corruption of institutionalized religions. The stories start coming out. You see they're raping kids. You see just crimes and scandals. You see you begin to get the idea that being a man of the cloth didn't necessarily mean you had any moral grounding whatsoever, and you could really be a corrupt individual getting away with a lot just because people seem to give you a pass, and moral self-licensing, they call it, and it's still, somehow that scam still works. But anyways, so I really, as I was, wondering what happened with the Satanic Panic, growing really skeptical and critical of mainstream religious organizations, really growing an affinity just for the symbolism and narrative of Satanism, based on kind of the Miltonic idea of Satan the rebel, against the tyrant god. And you get those basic questions even, you develop those basic questions even as a kid, you know what I mean? What's wrong with knowledge, Wait a minute, who's really the bad guy in this whole Adam and Eve story here, And even theorizing, is it supposed to be that you, develop an understanding, if you're a reasonable person, that the wrong person was denigrated in this mythology or whatever? I don't know. Really grew to like Satan, and all things Satan related after a while. And at first, I did gravitate towards the Church of Satan, the Satanic Bible, but after a while, like all that rhetoric about police state bullshit and the social Darwinism just didn't match what I was learning about human behavior, about social development, all those kinds of things, reciprocal altruism, all these things I was learning. I thought about human nature. We are cooperative by nature, and we should be. Just basic things just didn't add up. So I began to feel that they were kind of a throwback, a 60s throwback. And I didn't think I would get back to Satanism, but I still, really had a love for Satan. It wasn't something I necessarily advertised or needed to, because, at that point you just kind of offend people unless you're going to, be like I am now, a lifer, kind of vindicating this whole thing. But as you see in the film, Hail Satan, like at the beginning, like you had some guys working on a film, and the basis of the film was that they wanted to do this documentary where it was like activist documentaries. People like bring up this past as saying it discredits us because we didn't have the as I said in the film, we didn't have the hubris to think we could start this large international religious organization. But we did think that if we were doing the kind of activism we were doing, that other people would see that, and people identified as Satanists would kind of rally under that banner and start doing these things themselves. So, and we didn't think we'd get the attention for any of these things we were doing until we put out a film where we're doing that. So we started asking for equal treatment under laws that allowed broader exceptions for religious iconography or proselytizing on public grounds, saying, if you do this, Satanists are allowed. I wasn't really interested in that film project. I was the Satanist that the guy, Malcolm, he was putting together this film project. And, it required an alternative religious voice, of course, to ask for these privileges and exemptions. And he knew a Satanist, and I was willing to consult on this film. But at the very beginning, I wanted to keep arm's length. You know what I mean? Like, I was not interested in being like the publicly identified Satanist. And I still had feelings of terror, because even though I said I didn't deal directly with people ruined by the Satanic Panic, by that point, I was well in contact with people who were ruined by the Satanic Panic. Their family lives were destroyed. They were accused of things or whatever, because I had started writing about false memories being produced in the course of these irresponsible therapies and stuff like that. I was doing that before the Satanic Temple. So I was writing about these issues related to the Satanic Panic, and I was already going after these mental health professionals.
Like as yourself, or was it?
As myself. And so,
who are you writing for, or what was it like? What was the
most of this stuff I had to post independently, because editors are afraid to take on. Everything's like clickbait articles
Sure,
now,
totally,
written in the
yeah,
course of
yeah.
2 hours, and a lot of times editors will look at things, and if it looks like there might be legal issues, if you're calling out a specific doctor, they don't want to touch it. You know what I mean? You're going to post that on your own. So I published a few things like in Skeptical Inquirer, Skeptic Magazine, things like that. But that's really preaching to the choir, right? But looking into all these past cases and everything, there's this idea that if you're publicly identified as a Satanist, not far to follow are accusations of like child abuse or whatever. And some of these people, like, you know, the accusation alone, no matter how debunked, was enough to ruin their lives,
Sure.
right? The accusation can be totally debunked, but you'll still see it attached to their names, right? So it just seemed like suicide to me to be like identified as like a public face of Satanism. However, I wasn't going to let these guys do a film and misrepresent Satanism, right? So at the beginning, at that time, it was like, it didn't matter, theistic, non-theistic, whatever. There were certain kind of core values, you know, certain kind of symbols and stuff like that. And I was keeping the distance, didn't want my face on any of it. And I was telling them like, you know, no, this is how this needs to look. This is how you need to frame this. And then they had that actor like at the Rick Scott rally, and I'm trying to coach him, you know. And we did that rally, and I see him talking in the news, and like he did a great job, you know. Like he's a nice guy, great guy. I get along with him, but it was like I said in the film, like you just can't leave it to somebody else who doesn't have a background in this to do like real time interviews, you know.
But you had already done like TV stuff before that, right?
No.
No. I thought you said that.
No, not TV. No, I had no interest in it either. You know, like public speaking for you know like.
So
I was
the
one of
clips
those
in the
guys.
film were from something before the film came out.
Which
Wasn't there like what? Weren't you talking?
with CNN or one of the other news?
What media outlet was it? There was one. There's a clip in the film where you're on TV speaking about.
about Satanism?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what before? What are you talking though? Because like it was still in relation to the Satanic Temple.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, but so you're going back to the start of the film where you were trying not to be the face of it, but you were already the face of it.
Right, yeah, my face was already there. I was in the background, right? I just felt that level. I still didn't think anybody would recognize me, right? So I felt like, you know, and you see, like, I even changed my hair color a bit, and I'm wearing sunglasses or whatever. I'm like, nobody will see this, right?
Yeah.
So I felt safe on that. It wasn't until we did the pink mass, and I was like, I'm putting my nuts on the grave, that I was like, all right, shit's gone too far. And like, as hilarious as that was, it felt like an act of suicide to me, because I'm like, all right, there's no going back, you know, like, what am I going to do with my life now? You know, like, I'm in this to the end.
This is it,
like,
right?
This is it. And I either vindicate this or I die with it, right?
Yeah.
So that's when shit got really serious, and that's when it was like, you know, cameras off, guys. There's no documentary. You know, this is the real deal now, and that's what it's been ever since. So, you know, it's a real weird kind of dichotomy there, because on the one hand, it was hilarious, and we're like, yeah, fuck you. But on the other hand, I'm like awake at night staring at the ceiling, being like, oh, what the fuck have I done? You know, like, and I really did have sleepless nights, because like, when we first started with the Baphomet campaign, you know, asking to put our monument up next to the Ten Commandments monument, I wasn't media trained or anything. I started getting interviews all the time, and you know, it might not be apparent to anybody. A lot of people just heard of me watching the Hail Satan film, and they don't realize, like, I've gone through stretches of time where, like, I've done interviews from morning to night, you know, and a lot of those are local press or whatever, and a lot of that's articles that just show up and are forgotten after a couple hours, you know, a lot of podcasts and things like that, and like I never really looked into how big they were, but sometimes they're huge or sometimes they're small. But I was doing a ton of interviews, and I felt a desperate need to do every one of those interviews to clarify anybody's misconceptions, anybody's errors, whatever. And like, I would get to that point where it would be like 8 p.m. in Massachusetts, and I'd be thinking like, okay, I can rest now because like even on the West Coast they're
yeah,
wrapped up for the day
yeah.
or whatever, and I would just be all night because I didn't want to give up on the night, you know, because I didn't want it to start again the next day.
Wow.
You know, like I'd just be like, I end up falling asleep on the couch because I felt like, you know, I couldn't resign it because, you know, like I couldn't resign the night because that was the only time I felt like the activity had stopped and I was safe from any other pushback, you know. It took me a while to get over that. Like it was, got to the point of being like almost phobic, you know. Like I wasn't going to my bed. I was passing out on the couch.
Sure.
And then I was like, you know, I was getting like to the point also where I didn't want to leave my place. Like I had to think about it. I was thinking like, all right, I'm turning agoraphobic. So I would actually have to like tell myself like, okay, tomorrow by noon, you know, I'm going out, you know, I'm going to go out and I'm going to, if I'm working on my laptop, I'm going to do it in a place, you know, like I could just let myself hole up.
Yeah.
You know?
So when you were getting all this, like when it was growing, getting all this, like all these interviews, I mean, you learned to navigate through them, right? Like there's like the shitty questions, you make it better, but then there's like the stuff where they're trying to fuck you up, you know, like how do you deal with that? Like, who do you have a publicist or who is helping you filter out the crap, or you were just taking it all?
That's me. That's one thing. Like,
Yeah.
like I'm always quick to say like for me to tell my own personal story, like diminishes all the work of all the people around us who have done so much. But I will be the first to say, like, I take full fucking credit for how the media was handled at the beginning and everything. And you know, I wrote the press releases. I kept the comments on point. I argued it in the debates. You know, I you know, and to me, like somebody who never wanted to be in the public eye, and like goes into the public eye under that intense scrutiny, like. There's a massive amount of stress to be like invited on Fox News. So like, you don't know what they're really gonna ask you.
Yeah.
You know, like the producers come on, they say like it's about this or what. Megyn Kelly's producers lied to me about everything.
Yeah, of course.
Tucker Carlson's did not. Tucker Carlson's producers were cool, actually.
Wow.
As much of a dick he is,
Yeah.
like his producers were on the level with me like both times. You know, they had me on the show twice, and that was fine. But like.
Wait, they had twice? Why twice?
They had me on twice. I think he was angry about how things went the first time.
Angry at you because you were able to like keep your shit together.
So I think the second time was revenge. Like, and it didn't work out either. Because the first time he had me on was about that veterans monument that I showed you downstairs, and he wanted to delegitimize us as a religious group.
Yeah.
He was trying to say that we were just trying to make a mockery of religious people and their faith, and we're beating up on these small town people who set up a Christian Veterans Memorial. And I don't think he expected me to not care about that argument at all and to use his own words against him, because he sees himself as this champion of libertarian free speech. So I just kept hammering on his cognitive dissonance about free speech. I was like, it doesn't matter what you think of us as a religious group. You know, we have a right to be here. And then he started questioning how many people were in the Satanic. I told him, and then he said he didn't believe it. And I said, it doesn't matter. There could be two of us. You know, like, it doesn't. We still have a right to the open forum of free speech. I think that really pissed him off because it forced him to agree with me. Like he kept wanting to say we weren't legitimate. He didn't expect me to say, who cares? You know, like I really don't care what you think. So the second time he had me on, I think he thought he really had the knockout punch, right?
Yeah.
Because we had just released a press release where it was like, the big thing in the news was the bakery in Colorado that wasn't going to make the cake for the gay couple. And we put out a press release and we said, all right, if a bakery's not going to make a cake for a gay couple, they have to make it for Satanists because religion's a protected class, you know, so order a satanic cake, you know, and we had like this template for like a nice Satan
from the same bakery.
Yeah. So Tucker Carlson had me on, and I think he was thinking like, okay, this is like my crowd can get behind this. Here it is. They're trying to compel people against their religious beliefs to do what they don't want to do. So he had me on. He's like, I totally disagree with compelling people to do that. And I don't think he expected me to say what I did, which was like, okay, fine. I can agree with that. However, let's not make like the gay baker be forced to make a cake for the evangelical bigots. So I was like, so either give protected class status to sexual orientation or take it away for religion. And at that point, I think he was just like, fuck, here we go again. You know, like, I have to agree with this. And then he started speculating that I had had a bad childhood. And then he ended the interview by yelling that I should go back into my hole. And at that point, go crawl back into your hole, he said.
Wow.
And I was like, I totally won this.
Yeah, that's
like,
so
like,
rad.
Yeah. Like, knockout punch right there. But anyways, I was saying, like, before you get comfortable with that, it's terrifying to know that, you know, you're going to be before an audience of millions, you know, before a hostile interviewer.
The wrong audience.
Right, yeah.
Or maybe the right, depending on how you look at it. But,
and it's a hostile interviewer who's going to be doing everything they can to try to discredit you.
Yeah.
And, like, this is, like, at that point, too, like, it's the biggest audience I had been in front of. Fuck that up, nothing else matters. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's my one performance and that's it. So, but you also know going in that being nervous is what's really going to fuck you up. So you're just like, all I have to do is not get nervous. Like, and that's like trying to not think of the blue elephant or whatever. And it's like, oh, fuck, you know?
But you did it.
Yeah, now I feel comfortable with that kind of thing. Now when people comment, and they're like, man, you seem totally comfortable on, like, Good Morning Britain or whatever. I'm like, well, who's going to, you know? At that point, I was actually disappointed that Piers Morgan wasn't there because, like, you know, he's notoriously a prick, and I thought this is going to be a hostile interview. Wow. But the British, you know, they were terribly polite. I knew I was going to be disappointed as soon as I was in the green room, and a producer came back and was like, so here's some of the questions they're going to ask you. We're going to see if this is okay with you. And I was like, really? What?
They have you on. They're like, we eat everything you stand for. Here's some tea and crumpets.
Yeah, and I had some, like, handler from the distribution company, and the producer left, and I said to her, I was like, do you think they're just fucking with me, trying to throw me off? And she's like, oh no, this is gonna be really nice.
Wow.
Okay.
Do you have any other situations like that were pretty brutal or, like, combative?
When I've been on, like, broadcast or whatever?
Or anything.
One of my favorite ones was one of the earliest ones where there was a time with the Baphomet Monument where everybody wanted to debate me. And I had these debates all scheduled. And they were debates with, like, politicians. So and this was before I had done, like, my Fox News appearances. So I was still in nervous mode. I was still in, like, I don't think I can do public speaking kind of mode. And I was also thinking, like, okay, these politicians pander to the evangelicals a lot, but they've made their career debating people and things like that. They're not really this dumb. You know?
So they're, like, trained, I guess.
Right, yeah. So I was thinking, like, this is going to be difficult. And so Huffington Post Live had me on with a legislator from Oklahoma, this guy Paul Wesselhoff, I think was his name, and he was speaking in defense of putting the Ten Commandments monument on the public grounds, and I tore him a new asshole. You know, I started talking about the responsibilities of a public representative, and I started yelling at him that his responsibility as a public representative was to ensure that there was equal opportunity and availability for all points of view. You know, he was supposed to represent Oklahoman Hindus, Jews, Muslims, and even Satanists, you know, insofar as like equality of law was concerned. And then there was a pause, and his response was, well, that's your opinion. I have my own. And I was just like, holy shit, these guys really are that stupid. Wow. You know, there was nothing, like, there was no curveball or whatever. I felt, and after that, everybody backed out of their debates with me. And I was like, and I was thinking, like, all right, on the one hand, I could credit myself for doing really well, but I was also thinking, like, I probably only had to do well enough that some of these politicians looked and were like, okay, if it's not going to be a one-way beating in which I beat the Satanists, like, I can't debate the Satanists. Wow. Do you know what I mean? Like, if the Satanist is going to make any type of credible showing, like, I can't do this, you know? So that was disappointing.
But I wonder about some of them. Like, they probably are trained to debate, you know? I mean,
you would think so.
Did you have any of that? Did you like, go and, like, get, like, I don't know. No,
I didn't get debate training.
Like, public speaking, I don't know.
But it was funny, like, I heard Penny Lane, she's the director of Hail Satan. She was doing a podcast with Penn Jillette, the Las Vegas magician.
Of course, yeah.
Bullshit show, yeah. And it was really weird. I felt like the oddly voyeuristic in a weird way, like I shouldn't be listening to it, because they were talking about me, and it's really a bizarre thing to hear. But Penny said, like, Penny mentioned how the first question presented to me at Sundance was some lady just saying, like, so what happened to your eye? And Penn was like, well, how did that go? And she was like, she was talking about me. She said, he has this amazing ability to give these great, eloquent answers to the question you didn't ask in a way that you don't recognize that it wasn't the question. That wasn't an answer to the question you asked. And it was like, Penn was like, oh, I guess that's his, that's what makes him the guy for the job or whatever.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
And I think, like, that just developed during my introduction into this, like, by fire. I had trial by fire, and I just had to go through these things. And so I've been through enough interviews where people ask really stupid questions looking for a specific type of answer. And I already know the points I want to get across, and I'll find a way to work those in instead.
I mean, it's kind of like, I mean, we always get like, it's like the band interview, like, what are your influences? And I'm always like, who cares what, like, yeah, I can list off these bands, like that's fine, but what's really important is, why did I like all this weird shit? Like, what in life, in the world I live in, made me go to that? Like, things not musical are really more important. So it's kind of like, you would I'm sure, I bet you got that question a million times, or I was curious though, like how
I've gotten good at detecting, like, what they want me to say too,
and
knowing when to not, knowing just how to never say it. Because there was one interview I got burned on in Oklahoma where it was like the guy interviewing me was trying to make the case that we were just making the film because, like, we had done the Rick Scott rally thing, and like we were done doing any type of film. We weren't working with Penny, we weren't working with CNN, nobody at the time, because CNN did like a 45-minute documentary about us too that people don't remember anymore. But this guy kept asking about making a film, and I was like, we're not making a film. And then he's kept going on, like, he kept coming back to it, and he's like, well, couldn't there be a film made about you guys at some point or whatever? And I was just like, yeah, somebody could. We get offers to make films. So then he made his article about, pulling like certain quotes like, yeah, a film might be made kind of thing. And it was like, okay, I see what that guy's doing. Now I know when people are doing that, I just know when to stop and say, no.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing more I'm giving you on this, like, asked and answered.
So, but I mean, the thing is, it's like a film. It's not like, I don't know, Mel Gibson making one about Jesus.
How dare you? How fucking dare you?
It's like, it's a whole other world of documentation. So what was his point in like criticizing you on that?
It's the same. There's always the question about our legitimacy as a religious organization, and people want to say that it's like the religious aspect of this, like the whole Satanism thing, is just a facade cover up for some other agenda. You know what I mean?
Or like that you're just secret capitalist and
we always get the question from like even people who are inclined to support us, like, so is this theater? Is this political? Is this a religious movement? And it's like, and they'll ask all these different things as though they're mutually exclusive, and like we're just kind of like, well, sure, it's all part of it, like it's.
So you'll say it's all of that.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's all. It can't be disentangled. You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, everything. To me, I think everything is political.
And everything's theater too. Like, if you look at religion, a lot of the, what religious organization doesn't use art and pomp and imagery and like, I mean, what's that ritual? It's theater, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. Or like when people see that we engage in what they call pranksterism, so they think there's something inauthentic about it. It's like, what? Why? Like, it needs to be stone sober and.
I mean, that's what Christianity was all about, pranksters, but like not fessing up to the fact that it was a prank. It's like let's trick everyone.
Yeah. I liken us to like the the stage magician who doesn't claim to have supernatural powers, like it still is effective. You know, it's still a great spectacle. But you're not trying to diminish people in any way. You're not trying to fool them, or I don't know.
Well, I guess maybe like there's this, I guess with certain other religions, there is this form of oppression, and that's something
Well, it's the difference between authoritarian conditioning and trying to give people these tools to develop their own creativity and enrich themselves. There's a whole dialogue we kind of have going on now that one of our people, our coordinators, is putting together a book about our rituals, and one of the most interesting emergent properties from this community in the Satanic Temple is how it handles rituals, because we've never really told chapters, explicitly how to handle rituals within their chapters. And like, there's only a certain amount of things somebody like me can do to author the culture of the Satanic Temple, right? At a certain point, you have to just see what people make of it.
Uh-huh.
And it could have been that we became populated by people who really liked the atheist prankster narrative and weren't so much into the idea of Satanism. That's not what we ended up with. We ended up with people genuinely attached to non-theistic Satanism, and they like doing rituals and things like that. But the rituals in the Satanic Temple are very creative. They're like, we have rough templates. There's no like real scripts where it's like, you say this and somebody says this back. It's not this like stand up, sit down shit. It's participatory, and people like make these rituals for specific events sometimes, and they change these rituals to match what they want, what they want to get from it, and a lot of them are very cathartic, and they have, there's a lot of applied psychology involved. Like, we had a destruction ritual here. People wrote down these different things they wanted to be rid of in their lives, and they lit them in fire and stuff like that. And in that kind of circumstance, people were breaking down in tears and things. It was very emotive for them. It was very, very cathartic and very, very interesting. But I think it's interesting that we never told people that that's what ritual is. And that's what developed from this philosophy of anti-authoritarianism.
Sure.
Right? And you see a distinct difference between churches and religions that are premised on authoritarian conditioning, where their rituals are very much about, you stand up at the right time, you repeat after these lines, kind of thing. It's authoritarian conditioning, and like, our rituals are the opposite. They're supposed to be personally enriching and, creative processes. I think that's a beautiful thing. That's something I'm really proud of to see.
So, man, okay, because for me, when I would look at like Satanism, it seemed almost like, and I don't want to say the wrong thing, but it seemed like true anarchy, right? Like self-governing. Does that seem right to me? Like, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking about something that's been the great pride of seeing this developed in Satanism, like that ritual aspect. I mean, there's disappointing aspects too. And
like what?
Well, just like originally, the idea was that there would be no kind of central authority for the Satanic Temple. At the time, I had like this was before like Anonymous, the hacker group, kind of became synonymous with like 4chan right-wing bullshit or whatever. And there was
that 4chan stuff is synonymous with the Anonymous now?
Yeah, Anonymous was more kind of like a,
but it seemed like
4chan brainchild, right? I mean, that's where they did a lot of their. Now 4chan, is really known for its like
white power shit.
Yeah. But
Anonymous seemed like.
But Anonymous were like these hacker anarchists, right? And there was no like central authority to Anonymous. It was just like people believed in certain principles, and they held up the banner of Anonymous. And like, I kind of had these idealistic notions at the beginning that that's what the Satanic Temple would be, right? There would be no governing body of the Satanic Temple. People would get the Satanic Temple, and they would call themselves a Satanic Temple, and they would be doing these things. And it was like, but it was pretty early on where I was like, okay, I'm a public person and I can't run the risk of like some South Florida chapter like marching with the Klan or something like that. So it was like, because I'll crash and burn. Like, so we had like kind of a basic structure in place of like, how do we regulate this, right? And I feel like that's kind of the situation we're in now, is like trying to balance maximum autonomy against like those principles of anti-authoritarianism. It's just seeing what the real limits are. And it's always kind of an open question, because it's not so much a question of like increasing centralized authority, of course, for its own sake, but increasing centralized authority for the sake of all of those who identify with us, so they can feel reasonably secure that they're not going to be suddenly associated with some heinous activity or some heinous statement because we weren't keeping track of what other chapters were doing. So now, you know, we just do have this governing body where chapters want to do anything public facing, release a statement or whatever, they run it by us first, and we just look over whether there's legal issues, whether there's other like health considerations, liabilities, you know, injuries, whatever, you know, potential for injury, that kind of thing, and either give it our approval or not. But we've tried to develop a culture within our council where the overriding question is why not, rather than making the chapters justify why. You know, we want to give them kind of a real creative freedom to do what they do, and we only want to really veto that if there's serious concerns that this would make the rest of the organization look bad or whatever. So it's just interesting to see what the limits are to that, you know what I mean? Because we start out with that mindset of complete anarchy, right? And then the more we develop, the more we have to put a system in place.
But not like complete anarchy, because that seems like this sort of weird, like nihilistic punk rock idea of just like, fuck it, you know, like fuck the world. It's like, no, like just keep your shit together and don't harm or oppress other people. Like, I mean, it kind of seems like that's the sort of general guideline, if you can apply the word guideline to anarchy. You know, it seems like that would be like the sort of place to, you know, reside in, I guess, live in or exist in or whatever.
I mean, you do want to have a system in place you just want the optimal system in place, right? You want to encourage collaboration and have everybody open to, you know, having a voice in which they feel they can approach, you know, solutions to different problems they have.
And the world's changing and people are changing. So it's like, it's interesting to think about like how you said the Church of Satan people were like upset with what you were doing, and it's like, well, and you can, obviously it's speculation, like what would Anton LaVey do or think or feel now, you know? It's like, so like the world has changed. So like going back, like the mindset of the Church of Satan is like not necessarily relevant to, you know, the 2019.
Kind of the most facile response to the Church of Satan is they're so obsessed with the idea of the strong overcoming the weak that it's like, well, I guess you're watching that in action with the Satanic Temple taking primacy over the Church of Satan. Well, I mean, in a very real way, that's true. I mean, we have something that's more relevant, I think, and more appealing and readily understandable to
and
people.
More mature. Can we say that? Like, it seems fucking.
And I think like our conception of what Satanism should be is more intuitive to people who view, who look down upon Christian beliefs as being theocratic and autocratic and totalitarian. Like, to go in rejection of that in the direction of a different type of tyranny is counterproductive. It's silly, you know. Their views are very right wing now and very much associated with kind of the evangelical nationalists we fight against now.
Oh yeah.
So it stopped making sense to people.
But maybe those views were always there, sort of, to some extent.
With the Church of Satan?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they definitely were. Those were in place. Those had been in place for a while. They just necessarily weren't associated with the evangelical right in the United States. You know, because at a certain point, they were, earlier on, they were rallying against probably the best things you can associate with Christianity, the idea of charity, the idea of mutual cooperation, things like that, things that aren't worth attacking anybody.
Yeah. I mean, it did kind of seem like they were, like, if you were to like look at them as like having that prankster aspect, it was sort of like this, just like a bunch of fart jokes and shit like that. You're just like, come on, like if you're gonna be a prankster, at least like have there be some kind of substance to it.
Well, that's why it was hilarious to see them acting like they were appalled by the pink mass that we had done, and that this was something that like it just makes us all look bad. I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay, and then so you also had mentioned like the struggle, or like I guess the combativeness that you get with atheist organizations. Like that just seems, it's like a bummer to hear that. I mean,
it's not really. I mean, let me clarify. We just see some of this shit on social media, where people who identify themselves as atheists get all pissed off. But for the most part, like the relevant atheist organizations have been really, really good to us.
Like you're both fighting the good fight. Like it seems like there's power in numbers. Like everyone can kind of like come to agree on most things. Like we should probably just be chill or whatever.
There's a problem in just dialogues in general now where people completely lack nuance. So you have some of these atheists who have this talking point where religion is poison, religion is toxic, religion is the root of all evil. And I would have them revise that and say, well, why don't you move your concerns over to superstition and recognize that you can have non-theistic religions, you can have religions that aren't toxic, that aren't premised upon beliefs that are intellectually insulting and backward, and then we're fighting the same fight. But you have some people they can't revise their thinking to the point where they can see.
You're getting more to the root of
the root of the problem, right?
Yeah, because religion is pretty much in between. If you're saying get rid of the superstition,
right?
And then, it makes sense.
And I would expect them to recognize this when it's pointed out, and when they hold on to this notion that, no, you can't be a religion because you're not applying superstition to it, and I will never have anything to do with a religion because I have vowed this as an atheist or whatever. It's like they are demanding second-class status as citizens, because when I point out to them, like, look, in our legal system, religions are conferred certain rights and privileges that the non-religious aren't. So you should insist that non-theistic people can claim the exemption and privilege of religion, or else you're willfully rendering yourself second-class status, right? But that doesn't work either.
So what would that be
for
like?
Some of them,
like it would be like all the religions, and then the atheism would be like not a religion, but represented as some sort of like entity, right? I guess I don't know how would they address it or call it, or
if I remember correctly, the American Humanist Association, they're openly atheist, but they've caught on. They're willing to call themselves a religious perspective, and they should, because the humanists are different than atheists in the way that they do try to define affirmative values applied to what they do believe in, as opposed to just asserting what they don't believe in, right?
Yeah.
And so as a community, they should have just as much right to any religious privilege and exemption as anybody else. And sometimes I think they do. I think they've won some cases also. And that's a step in the right direction. But like I said, it's not going to be generally recognized till there's a Christian non-theistic group.
Sure. What other, this might be a strange question to answer, but what other religions do you think kind of fit in line, not in line, but like can kind of coexist with you? Like in your opinion, like what, like, I don't know, like for me growing up, like in like the hardcore scene, like punk and hardcore, there was like all of a sudden there was like Krishna bands, and you're like, what the fuck is this? Like we all, you know, we like, yeah, we hate God or we hate Christians or whatever, and then there's like Krishna, like that's, and people are like, yeah, but they're vegetarian and they're peaceful, like, you know, they're still jacked up religion, like, and it's fucked up and weird, and like, and so there was like this weird backlash with like a lot of punk bands and stuff, like thinking like, why are Krishnas accepted? Because they are, I don't know, like, is there something like that, you know? Because I also struggle with like, you know, I go to yoga a lot, and like there's this like, you know, it kind of like it's integrated into this weird thing, and I can't relate, and I can't accept certain. I feel like it's like this sort of like white privileged world that people live in, you know, like upper class world that people are coming from. So like, what religion do you think that's recognized is accountable, I suppose, or like practical?
There's a lot to that question,
okay,
right? Because we do get Christians writing to us and saying like, hey, we get it, you know, like we don't agree with you guys on like theological issues, but we agree you have your rights, and you know that you have the right to believe what you believe, and the state shouldn't be involved in picking and choosing, you know, proper religions. And like I told you earlier, like the rally at the end of Hail Satan wasn't shown, but we actually had Christian ministers speaking on behalf of the issue of pluralism. So, you know, like, not all Christians, you know.
Yeah,
like
so I know.
I mean, it's just too big, right? But a lot of the minority religions, which are any non-Christian religions now, you know, they don't have a bad thing to say about us. And like, we've had Muslim groups like happy about us doing what we're doing and speak on our behalf and stuff like that. And just the same, it's almost uncomfortable in a way for me, because it's like, I don't ever want to not criticize the backward, conservative, superstitious elements in any religious group, but people are on high alert when it comes to criticism against Islam. And I also feel like, and I understand that, right? Because like, I feel like American Muslims get shit on a lot, and I don't think there's a whole lot in the way of like, you know, I mean, maybe I'm ignorant to it, and I'm familiar in Detroit. There, you know, I grew up, there's a huge Muslim population there, and I didn't know much about their religion because they never pushed it on anybody, and they never tried bringing it into politics, you know. So to me, Muslims were like this really benign group, you know. They were just, you know, people in the community or whatever. Just the same, like, my sympathy as a Satanist often goes towards the ex-Muslims who everybody shits on. You know, you get these Muslim heretics who are felt abused by their past as Muslims, and I'm like, all right, they're like the Satanists of the of the Muslim world, and you know, they end up being called Islamophobic and things like that. And I think
because they left,
well, because they openly criticize like the fundamentalists, you know, the fundamentalists in their religion. And it does trouble me when people like in the liberal progressive camps jump on that bandwagon of shitting on the ex-Muslims for being Islamophobic or whatever.
Oh yeah,
just because they don't want to be seen as like the Fox News style Islamophobe. So, but there's also, you know, two types of Muslim or Islamic critics. You know, there's the type who understand that there's benign Muslims in the way that there's benign Christians, and that it's a huge religion, and that like one population of it isn't necessarily indicative of the entire population that has some kind of cultural attachment to it. But that doesn't mean that some of these old, archaic, brutal texts are not counterproductive or shouldn't be critically scrutinized. Yeah. You know? And then there's the ones who criticize, you know, or there's the ones who defend, you know, there's a type who will criticize Islam because they are racist, or they are the Fox News anti-Muslim type. There are others who have the more nuanced criticisms, and sometimes they're accused of being, you know, just the same as the Fox News Islamophobes or whatever else. And I don't know, it just becomes a real hairy dialogue that, you know, you don't even necessarily want to get into unless you have the opportunity to offer all those caveats first, you know.
So maybe there's like this sort of like pyramid. Obviously Christianity won. I mean, we're calling this 2019, like, you know, like they won. So they're the ones that are like,
oh no, they're oppressed if you hear it from their point of view.
But they're able to bully, like, well, yeah, they're fearing. It's like a white supremacist. They're like, they want to keep that supremacy, you know. So they're like, well, let's bully these other smaller, you know, mindsets or religions or whatever. So maybe that's. But again, too, it's like you can't say all, because there are. Yeah, there's two people that are in that, you know, that I feel I'm close to in my life that are Christian, and I'm like, God, I just wish that all Christians were like this. But unfortunately, it's just a small fraction of them that I've encountered on this planet so far that I can like agree with and respect. And appreciate.
I feel like I see the simple-mindedness on both ends of the political spectrum, right? Because on the one hand, I do feel like we can criticize Catholicism in ways we're not allowed to criticize Islam, right? And because then you'll get that knee-jerk reaction from the liberal progressive side where it's like you're one of those Fox News Islamophobes. Well, you can say what you want about the Catholics and everybody's going to applaud you, right? They're going to say like, yeah, fuck them or whatever. But then on the other side of that, like, the Catholics still have this kind of religious immunity where we don't talk about exorcism as being the dangerous superstitious practice that it is. You know, if that's kind of like one of these Western culture religious things where when we do the same things that, you know, so-called primitive witch doctors do, like it's ignored. Even though, you know, they'll pretend like overseas or, you know, African witch doctors are somehow more primitive than us, and yet we just ignore the fact that we have people killing their children all the time and exorcisms, you know. Like, I mean, I get news alerts on exorcisms and people are dying all the time due to exorcisms, and yet news coverage of exorcism always acts like exorcism is just this kind of undetermined phenomenon. You know, is there something to it? Is there, you know, are there demons that possess us? Some people believe there are, and often like articles about exorcism or the Vatican like training a whole army of new exorcists now. Like exorcism is very popular now. It's growing in popularity even as membership in the Catholic Church diminishes. And you know, most of the articles you read about this will just talk about to experts from the Vatican about demonic possession. And it's like, in that way, Catholicism, Christianity gets a pass. Like, that's a way you see like really entrenched kind of that kind of white privilege, like indoctrination that people don't even recognize. There was last month in October, there was a kid drowned by his father during an exorcism, and his mother was witnessing this happen, so she tried to call the pastor. Right before she called 911. The pastor didn't pick up, then she called 911. The news article about this that I think it was in Washington Post. And Washington Post is like a progressive, like liberal paper supposedly. It didn't mention anything about the religion of this family. Turns out they were Catholic, right? You wouldn't have gotten this from the article. Instead, it pointed out that they were part of some Native American reservation tribe, as though that had something to do with it, right? And that's how those kinds of stories will go. The exorcism stories, they'll try to point to it as being, and I think I was telling you about this earlier, when we had first offered to put our private donation of the Baphomet Monument up to the next to the Ten Commandments Monument, there was this satanic panic in Oklahoma. You know, there was this fear, like was it really this legal circumstance now where they were going to have a satanic monument on the public grounds, and what would this do? You know, would it come awake at night and like come and eat children or whatever? I don't know what they were thinking, but they were thinking it was going to, unravel the moral fabric of Oklahoma if that was there. In that time period where there were all these articles about, Satanists coming to Oklahoma, some Christian guy decapitated somebody at his brother's house, I think. His brother was playing cards with this guy, and his brother said that the murderer, his brother, had been watching videos on YouTube about his Christian beliefs at the point where he picked up this blade and hacked off the head of his friend because he thought his friend was this practicing witch and into the occult or whatever, and I don't know, the guy may have been. But this was clearly a case of a Christian religious fanatic lopping off somebody's head, and his own brother, who was there at the scene, said that he lopped off this guy's head because of his Christian beliefs. And in the articles about this, they talked about how this guy was mentally imbalanced, which, if the guy had been a Satanist, that would have been the only thing they would have talked about. This guy's a Satanist, and that's it. That explains why he cut this guy's head off. In this case, the chief of police, who was speaking to the press about this murder, actually said that they found no connection between the murderer and ISIS or other Islamic beheadings, and therefore, there were no religious implications to the murder at all. Now that's really the protective buffer. Over our own Western culture, religious identification that we have, that people don't even recognize it sometimes until I point it out. Even people who are inclined to agree with me on these things, they don't even realize that this has been going on right in front of their faces until I show them, this is what exorcism does. A lot of people get beaten during exorcisms.
But where was that at, where the beheading happened?
It was in Oklahoma in 2014 that a guy chopped off another guy's head. And it turns out, a month before that beheading, there was another guy who lopped off the head of one of his co-workers. I forget where he was working. And it wasn't clear... it wasn't really clear what this guy's motive was. I guess he was just a disgruntled employee or whatever. But it was interesting to note that in that article, too, in 2014, they said that this guy had no connection to ISIS or other Islamic beheadings. And they, in fact, went on in the article to talk about how he, in fact, was a Christian, and therefore this beheading couldn't have had anything to do with religion, of course, because we just don't do those kinds of things, right?
I mean, I guess if you were... I don't want to talk shit about people in Oklahoma or wherever these things happen, but it's like...
Oh, you can talk shit, right? You're from Oklahoma. You can, we'll leave it to you.
But it's like on every piece of money. It's like, you have to pledge allegiance to the flag and, reference God in that in school. It's like, it's everywhere. It's in every single day. So it's like, let's give it to those people to not make the connection between, the beheadings being a religious act, I guess I see why that happened. I mean, I don't agree with it, but I guess I see why. They're just like, oh, nope, don't see a connection,
Well, I hope that something people get out of the Hail Satan film is, just seeing some of those times that people have invoked the fact that In God We Trust is on money. It gives them some kind of exclusive license to the public forum. Like, you see that in the scene where our chapter in Arizona is asking to give an invocation before the Phoenix City Council. And in the public comments at the city council meeting preceding the one where our chapter was supposed to give the invocation, there were a few people who got up at the podium and held up a $1 bill. And they said, you see, it says In God We Trust. And to them, that means that we're a Christian nation and Christians have some kind of exclusive privilege, and they have... they have less restrictive rights than everybody else. They have a right to the public forum that we do not. And I think that's important for people to recognize, because at the time they accepted In God We Trust to be put on the money in like the 1950s. Not even the ACLU pushed back, because the whole argument was that it was patriotic and ceremonial. Nobody really took this as a religious statement. This was just kind of some... I don't know. This was just kind of some statements about... I don't even really know the argument, because I don't believe in it. To me, it's explicitly a religious statement. But people didn't take it as such at the time, and I think that's a big mistake. Like, we get some people criticizing us sometime, asking, well, what's the big deal? You know, let the Christians have their display in the public square. Why you got to go in there and piss them off? And it's like, it's not, even for them, it's not really about the monument. It's just being there. That's not the only thing they want. Like, they could put their 10 Commandments on any church. There's a Christian church on every corner, you know, put your...
So they're getting pissed off because they're losing their power, really.
Yeah,
right. I mean, that seems like...
I hate to say that, like, this is the death throes of their Christian identity or whatever, because like you realize they were saying that during the Revolutionary War, you know, that we had reached the end of Christendom and that kind of thing, and we just see it keep fighting back.
But it's like when you hear the argument, like, you know, black power is the same as white power, and it's like it's not. They're two different things. You can't compare them. And, you know, if you have this thing with, like, you know, people that are white supremacists worried about, like, oh my God, white people are going to become the minority. It's like, well, and then, you know,
and then what?
Then what? You know, right. Like, you know, like, you're welcome to the fucking club, asshole.
Yeah. But you hear that most from people where there's no real legitimate fear of them becoming a minority where they are any time in their lifetime. So it's really bizarre to me that they care at all. It does seem like people who are in more diverse environments care less about being the dominant, you know, ethnic representation. That feels like one of those rural, isolated kind of things where they feel like the barbarians are at the gates, you know, ready to swarm in at any moment. Maybe that's the Fox News crowd.
Yeah, I mean, they're at least painting that picture for people. I think. I don't know.
Yeah, they certainly are. I don't tend to watch it unless I'm in the green room, you know.
Oh yeah.
And as far as I can tell, they're still talking about Benghazi.
I'm still amazed that you were on there. Like, that's such a great accomplishment. You know, like, congratulations.
I'm proud of my Fox News appearances, but I was telling you earlier, like, I tailor my rhetoric to actually make my argument to those crowds.
Sure.
When I'm on some, like, conservative media, I make sure that I highlight those things that will challenge their cognitive dissonance. You know, I can legitimately speak to issues of religious liberty, and they're going to have to think of ways in which they can pretend we don't apply. You know, I'm the one who can talk about, you know, that kind of libertarian ideal of freedom of choice and, like, non-government intervention on issues of viewpoint. And that's the kind of rhetoric they've been putting forward to their benefit so often that they didn't think that anybody else could have a claim to it. And to some of them, like, it's actually enlightening. It's almost uncomfortable to get messages from people who identify themselves as regular Fox News viewers, or when I got messages from people who said they love Tucker Carlson, watch him all the time, but they thought I did a really good job on the show. You know, you can be a little uncomfortable with that.
Why though? Like, I mean, maybe you got that little, you planted that little piece of seed.
It's a good thing overall. But, like, the knee-jerk reaction is to be like, wait, I looked good to Tucker Carlson's crowd? You know, is that a good thing? But you see enough of the pissed off messages to be like, okay, everything, the universe is still in order, right? There's some people, it's weird to sometimes be comforted to see that the people you never reach are still there.
Oh yeah. Well, it's. I mean, this might not be the exact thing, but, like, there was this anonymous. There's this article on Anonymous how they were, like, ratting out the Klan, like, they're giving out, like, their, you know, names and their whoever they were, like, and where they were, like, in the ranks or whatever. And I thought this article was great, and I posted it on Facebook, and all these people were, like, you know, commenting in, and this one guy, like, chimes in. He's a Klansman, and he's like, you know, it's weird the like sort of nuance that he had, because everybody was like, so he kind of chimed in and was like, this article actually is just, like, really good promotion for the KKK. And then all these people are like, who the fuck are you? And he's like, well, this is me. I'm the Grand Wizard of this in, like, Nashville or something, you know. And sure enough, he was. I looked at his profile and I was like, this is, like, pretty fucking frightening. And everyone was like, fuck you, and they were just so mad at him, and we kind of, I was like very like sort of skeptical and like commenting or like to him, and we kind of like, I kind of would try to say things like that I don't want to piss this guy off, like fuck it, I can go on tour and he'll just like go to the show and shoot me or whatever, like figure out, like he could figure out who I am just like I could figure out who he is. But we started having these conversations and it was interesting, and this isn't the same, but maybe sort of, I don't want to associate or relate to someone like that at all. But the end of our conversation came to that we both thought that Dave Chappelle was brilliant, and we were referencing the Blind Klansman skit that he did on the Chappelle show, and I was like, this is crazy, like. There's pictures of this guy shooting guns and shit, like, and he's, there's pictures of him in like his purple fucking wizard robe, and I'm like, this is like the real deal, and I'm having this like aggressive conversation where everyone else is just quick to be like, fuck you, but he was able to kind of like take the I guess aggressiveness of all the comments and not lose his shit,
your confession that you had any civil dialogue with this guy will have a certain group of people insisting that you're Nazi now.
That's fine.
Whatever. That's a sure thing. Like,
I mean, fuck him,
I'm
fuck
even
his
gonna get the
beliefs
backlash just for sitting here listening to it. Like, it's how bad it is.
Well, and okay, I see that, but like at the same, I know,
there you go.
Planet B or Nazis or KKK. It's like, yeah. I mean, it was such a weird thing to kind of like converse with someone like that, because it doesn't happen, like I don't want to have a conversation with people of that belief system. And I mean, whatever, I don't even know what my point is of this.
Or do you? Because,
I don't know.
Like, if you feel like you can actually change somebody's point of view, like, I mean, the thing is like, I've been called a Nazi just for questioning this whole notion that you should just go out and punch Nazis. I was like, you should laugh at them. Like, when these guys do...
Wait,
like,
so do you think people should punch Nazis or not punch Nazis?
It depends on the circumstance, but I don't think you can... I don't think you can just make this blanket statement that people have a moral responsibility to go out and punch these guys when they're doing like the straight pride parade or whatever.
Yeah.
Because... I feel like they feel like that validates them, right? They feel like they're going out to war, and if somebody comes out and they're just going to punch them, and these, for the most part, are just boneheaded assholes who want to go out and get in a fight, right? And sometimes I think it has less to do with the ideology and more to do with just wanting to go out and have some dirty hippie, take a swing at them so they can get in a fight and knock them out or whatever. And it's like, I feel like it's so much more harmful, like, if you're marching down the street and everybody's mocking you and ridiculing you, you should make a spectacle of it. Like I was saying, like the KKK, they come and do a rally or whatever. People should be joining in that rally, like putting in their fake buck teeth and playing banjos and stuff like that. Mock sodomizing their sisters and things like that. And making like they're part of that whole group and getting the pictures with them. And those guys, they'd be, then they would go home and, they wouldn't be saying like, those fuckers came at us and we, you know what I mean?
Because when you punch a Nazi, they're going to just be even more of a Nazi.
But I say that, but when I'm confronted by these guys, I often can't help but just be like, fuck you. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like we had all these death threats coming at us from white supremacists when we were doing our rally in Arkansas, and that's scary because Arkansas, it's fucking Arkansas, right? I don't know what kind of bunkers with what kind of weapons they're holed up in, but we had some group of them that was making the call out to all white Christians to come and oppose this thing, and they were making all these threats and everything. And then, of course, we got there, and it's an open carry state, and people had guns and everything. And it was like, we had guys signaling to us from across the street, and they were, on the Capitol grounds itself, you weren't allowed to have a gun, but just across the street on the peripheral, you were. And these guys had guns, and like, I knew my back was going to be to them when I was speaking. So I was thinking like, somebody, like, I was kind of surprised nobody took a shot, So I stood at the podium, and then before me were some of these white supremacist assholes with their flags, and even then I couldn't help but insult them. Like I had to make some comment about how here it was. Here's here's the fucking master race, you know, these doughy dickheads, you know, these flabby shits were standing there, you know, holding up their flags or whatever. And I was saying, like, and I was kind of questioning that whole note, like, the master race here, they're not fine physical specimens. And I was like, and they're also not the intellectual elite, you know. And then I said something like, I'm sure your mothers thought you were very handsome little boys or whatever, something like that. And
wow, you did that even with the guns and everything in the
yeah,
vicinity.
that's on YouTube somewhere. Like, wow. I just couldn't fucking help it.
Yeah.
I was just, even if I had gotten shot, you know, if I had last moments to like breathe out something, I had just been like, I still don't take you fuckers seriously. You know, I'm still laughing.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, but that would have been like, maybe part of them probably knew, like, if we shoot him, then, you know, fuck, if he dies or survives, it's gonna just make you like even more iconic, right? You know, like, oh my god, that's more coverage. I don't know.
One of those really funny though, I just can't win moments was after that. I had people, you know, more from our side of the spectrum who were very upset that I had body shamed the Nazis. And I was like, okay, you know, no, it's fine. It's fine if you're flabby, right?
Yeah.
But also don't call yourself the master race if you're neither intelligent nor
physically
fit. Physically fit.
Yeah.
So you know, don't you have to at least be one of those, right?
Yeah.
Like,
okay, that's great. Because you know, you think about it, like you. Oh my god, the fat shaming thing is you can't. But it's like, you know, it is one thing to like to take to be. I mean, I guess it's. I don't know. Maybe it's like the woman asking you about your eye in the first question. Like, from their perspective, like, is that the first shot they're gonna take at you? Like something that's not quite. I don't know, thought out. But you're not trying to sell yourself as the master race, you know? I mean,
right. Right. So I am allowed to let myself really fall out of shape. And
well, I wanted to ask you too about when we were talking about the Fox News thing. Is like, what about the opposite side? Like, do you ever talk to someone like from Democracy Now or NPR or something where it's like, this is a really well thought out conversation and does that happen? Maybe not quite as often as.
Well, usually it's podcasts, and usually it's you know, when people approach me about podcasts, like, I often don't know how listened to these podcasts are. So in the beginning, I was just saying yes to a lot of podcasts, and some of them were just like a guy in his basement and like some of his friends listened to it. And then but some of them I found out later were huge. Yeah. Like, there was this guy, Duncan Trussell. He was like this comedian out of LA. And it's funny because like I thought he was just some guy in his basement, you know, and he had done one of the drunk histories or whatever. Yeah. So he messaged me quite a bit. And like I was busy doing other things, and I felt like I was doing him a favor. I'm like, this fucking guy, I'm gonna do it. Okay, I'll do your podcast now. And I did his podcast, and then like that was one of the earlier things where a lot of people came to the Satanic Temple just from hearing me on the Duncan Trussell.
I mean, that's
show.
a good crowd right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what other ones what other like, I don't know, entities have like kind of got you into the right crowd?
It's.
I mean, the film in itself had to be. I mean, I saw it in independent cinema, independent theater, which I feel like, I don't know, people, they don't have. Do they have those in Oklahoma? I don't know. Like, no, you know,
inside of Walmart.
Yeah.
Well, like I said earlier, there was a 45-minute CNN documentary about us. Lisa Ling had this show. This American Life is NPR.
Yeah.
She something similar.
But it's in that realm.
This is Life with Lisa Ling. I think it was.
Sure.
And it was a 45-minute documentary about the unveiling of the Baphomet Monument, and that was like the biggest thing done about us at that point. And we gave CNN the exclusive to be able to come and like, and I'm very much one of those guys who I'm totally fine doing events, performances, or whatever sometimes with no cameras at all, like no record of it, just because like. And I even had this idea one time where we'd do like this whole stage performance thing and just do like a couple venues and have nobody film it, never release what the script was. Just leave it to people's memories.
Sure.
Because I feel like it kind of takes something away from things now, where there's always like some HD quality, video record of it, because like you kind of miss the atmosphere and the mood or whatever. And in certain ways, I think people's memory of that emotive quality in the place at the time is a more accurate record of what you can see like in verbatim on the HD footage or whatever. So with even CNN, when we were doing the unveiling, we limited them severely as to we limited them to like one camera and one spot at the event kind of thing. It was like a track though, like it was like there was like a side lane or whatever that they could go through. But
why would you want to do that?
Because we didn't want it to get in the way of the event. We were like,
that was the most important.
Absolutely no cameras in front of the stage type of thing. Because we had like a real thrash band playing, and people started moshing and everything, and we didn't want like, if we weren't careful with our media, like all these events would come off, they would just be staged events, right? Like the unveiling event would have been completely different. Like there would have been like a semicircle of media cameras in front of the stage, and then the rest of the people who were actually there for the event would feel like they were just kind of watching a studio set, like it wouldn't be a real event at all. But there was a real authenticity to that event that, CNN being there didn't take away from. But at the time, like Lisa Ling was really nice. I did a lot of kind of, background negotiations with what we would do and what we wouldn't do. What we would agree to, and like just like with Penny and her documentary, we weren't going to stage anything, we weren't going to reenact anything. You either caught it or you didn't. We weren't going to go that reality TV route where everything's actually staged type of thing. But I just remember I had this moment of terror, like 2 hours before it was going to air, because I hadn't seen it, the CNN piece, and I was.
But you lived it though.
But I didn't know what they were going to run. You know what I mean? I just didn't know what they were going to say about us. And so I was having friends over because we were going to all watch it air. They were just coming over. And I remember I picked up some liquor at the liquor store. And then when I was walking home, I suddenly felt like I got punched in the gut, and I nearly dropped what I had purchased because it just like all of a sudden this wave of nausea hit me. And I thought, what was I thinking? There is no way CNN, is going to give us a fair shake. I was just like, what the fuck is wrong with my head? Like, why did I agree to any of this? I was like, this is it, this is like this is like people's introduction to us. Like, millions of viewers are gonna. I was catastrophizing. I'm like, I'm fucking ruined. By the time it aired, I was already drunk, and I was just watching it, thinking like, here it comes, and I was just watching scene after scene. And I'm like, okay, all right. That's fine, next scene. This is same like when I first watched Hail Satan, the final cut, because I had no editorial control over that. But it's like when I first see these things, it's like I can't even see it objectively. It's like I don't even remember what played, only that it was accurate or it wasn't in certain parts. So I think that was one of the things that brought us to a bigger audience at that time.
And so that aired before the film came out?
Oh, yeah. That was like a good couple years before the film came out. Irritating story about that was Penny tried to buy some footage from CNN because they had all this extra. They were following us around for a while and got, and then they cut it all down to just 45 minutes. So they had a ton of material. And Turner, I guess, it's Turner that runs CNN. They wanted to charge something like some exorbitant fee, like $500 per second of the footage or whatever. It's like, they're never going to use it now. I already I don't know, that kind of pisses me off.
Like they got ad revenue from the show they aired. They should just be like, it's cool, use it or whatever. But I get it, I guess.
Yeah, or we're never going to use it. Let's put a reasonable price on it. So, rather than not have anybody pay anything because it's prohibitively expensive.
Yeah. So, like I always wonder, like who, like when you see things like documentaries and it's like not favorable, like they obviously didn't get the opportunity to veto anything like you did. I mean, what gave you like the sort of Like, what was your feelings when you were like, all right, we're gonna do this documentary. We have no way to veto anything. It is gonna be what it is. Like, what if it just fucked you guys up? You know, like.
Well, that was that was a real possibility.
Yeah.
But what nobody could really know, especially from seeing the film, is that like it wasn't like Penny Lane came along and I said, wow, somebody wants to do a documentary about us. Let's do it. The fact of the matter is like before Penny came along wanting to do a documentary about us, a lot of people wanted to do documentaries about us. And so I had gone through a bunch of pitches already, and they were a hard no every single time.
Okay.
And the fact is that these people's pitches were often pretty insulting. Like, they felt they knew what the Satanic Temple was. They felt like we would be willing to do the kind of reality, because some of these pitches were actually for reality show type things, for like some kind of network doing like a series or whatever. And just like a lot of them were also these kind of pitches where they were going to humanize the Satanists of the Satanic Temple. And I think they don't realize like how uninterested in that we are. Like I try to give like media tips to our chapters, and I don't want people to fall into that habit where they feel like we have to be respectable about our lifestyles or whatever, or ingratiate ourselves to the normals or whatever, or bend over backwards to say like, oh no, we don't do anything you'd be offended by. It's like I'm more concerned with just telling them, no, we have equal access, we have equal rights under the law, and as long as we're not breaking the law, we don't care if we offend your moral sensibilities in any other way, and which probably brings me back to your question somewhere, which I forgot what that was.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Oh yeah, no, about doing the documentary at all, and what what made me decide to do that.
Because it is a great documentary. I mean, I left the theater feeling like...
Right, Penny's a great filmmaker, though. And in fact, when Penny first suggested doing documentary, it was first her producer, Gabriel, who said he really liked what we were doing, thought a documentary could be, in the offing or whatever. I thought, no, I didn't want that done. However, I also felt that as a spokesperson for a bigger organization, I still had a duty to hear her out.
Sure.
But I felt certain my answer was going to be no, right? So she invited me to New York to meet with her and her producer, and she was also doing a screening of the film that she had just done, recently at that time, which was called Nuts, and it was about this quack doctor, early 20th century, who was claiming to transplant goat testicles into guys to make them more virile. It was a really well done documentary, and I really loved how she put together the narrative for it. It was like she obviously put a lot of thought into the narrative construction in ways that a lot of documentaries just don't think about narrative construction. A lot of documentaries are just like a chronological timeline that goes, in Penny's documentary was, I really appreciate the way it was thought out. And then when she was doing the Q&A, she was talking about disputes she had with anti-vaxxers, and that made me think, hey, maybe I can sell her on doing something Grey Faction related, because I was saying, like, I never get journalists to cover how we fight back against quackery in the mental health care field. So I thought, if she does a documentary that goes in that direction, this could really work out, So I talked with her afterwards, and I started telling her all about this, and she said, well, we could definitely work something, work something in or whatever. And I think, there's that segment in the Satanic Panic and Hail Satan, and I think that might be partially to fulfill some contractual obligation to cover that topic to a certain degree. I don't even remember at this point. But she really took her time to understand who we really are and what this meant to us, without coming to us and trying to say, like, this is the story I want to tell about you guys, without knowing what that story is. That was what made me shut down on everybody else. That was what made me, like, say no, absolutely not. To a lot of
instead of
other
her controlling the
filmmakers.
narrative, she was going to let it.
Yeah, she
play
was
out.
learning what the narrative was, and
Yeah.
she took a lot of time to do that too. And I also told her, like, okay, ultimately this isn't just up to me. Like, at the point where she had my endorsement, I also made her pitch this to our council and come out a meeting and talk about the kind of film she wanted to make. And even at that point, she wasn't given the green light. Everybody wanted more information.
Wow.
They put her through the,
Yeah.
they made her run the gauntlet. But then at a certain point, like, once we did sign off and say, all right, you can do the documentary, and we could only put certain restrictions on it. We could only say what we wouldn't do. And I was saying, like, I'm not going to let this become any type of a biography about me. Like, I don't care about, telling my autobiographical tale. And as I've gone through my spiel earlier, I feel that diminishes the work of all the other people. I should be speaking more as just like a spokesperson for a larger movement kind of thing, to the best of my ability. And we didn't want it to have any of those reality aspects, not investigating the private lives of Satanists and setting up those kinds of situations in which, let's see you argue with your family now about your religious convictions. Like, I really wanted it to speak to the issues.
Yeah,
and I think as a film, it really did those things.
It did.
But just the same, we had no editorial control. And ultimately, she could have broken a lot of those agreements with us, and there's not much we could have done, Even if it did fall under litigation, it probably would have been worth it, for them. And
Sure.
I think documentarians do that kind of thing. You see people who've been followed around by cameras for, years at a time, still, and probably
How long was the process?
It was like 3 years.
Wow.
Something like that. But you do see documentaries come out about people like who have been followed around by those camera crews and probably developed real relationships with them, and like the documentaries come out and they look like shit,
Yeah.
So, and that was another thing, like with like I was saying with the CNN piece, how beforehand I almost collapsed in anxiety over it, like knowing that they had a final cut of the film and knowing I had no idea what it was, because it doesn't take long once you're wired and once you have the cameras on you to just start acting naturally to a degree where you lose sense of the fact that you're being filmed, and you're wondering, like, shit, what all did I talk about?
Yeah.
What all happened? Like, what do I have to worry about here? What could the outcome of this be?
Yeah.
And even thinking about like what the worst case scenario is, and thinking like, I don't think anything bad. I don't think there's anything bad. But you also think, what could they make of anything?
Sure.
I don't know. It's just, yeah. It's terribly stressful.
And
It's
they'll
it's
edit.
That was 3 years of stressful, right?
Sure.
There.
I mean, they'll turn your words, right? I mean, you said it, like, just get like pieces for like, little quotes and then just make it out to be something else,
Yeah.
I did this. This is not really necessarily related, but I was on this My Ghost Story TV show as a joke with this friend of mine, and our whole goal was to talk about ghost farts. And we said ghost farts so many times in our interview, and they cut out every single one, made it completely linear, and there's not one time that we said ghost farts. And I was like, this is fucking crazy that they can edit that and make cohesive conversations and like pieces. Just taking chunks
You
of it.
had one message to get
We
out
were
there,
just
and
we
it
got to
was
say ghost fart
farts,
on
didn't
TV.
it?
Like, yeah, it was like History Channel. We're like, we're gonna do this.
Yeah.
Like, we gotta talk about ghost farts.
Instead, they have you talking about the
seems
geopolitical
like-
construction of it,
Yeah.
and you're all pissed.
Yeah. No, it made it seem like we were like legitimately there for like this real ghost story, and we're like, no, not even close. But
Right.
whatever. Well, I have one more question, and I don't know if you want to add anything, but like, I and this might be like not the best thing to ask, but I'm.
Oh, shit.
Well, no,
Here we go.
like, what's the worst religion? Like, I always think about like, is it Mormonism or is it Scientology? It's probably Scientology, but like, I wonder what your take is on that. Like, what is like the most fucked up, recognized organized religion that exists, or not even just like like currently, like it's still functioning as like a religion.
I think I think naturally as a Satanist, I really have I look really harshly upon the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. But of course, we have allies and people who identify with each. But I look at the text and I think that's brutal and archaic and harkens back to feudalistic, monarchistic, or even tribal times, where it's like I feel like we've really grown beyond that. But some people, they can really construct a positive message from it. So I don't really think it's a question of like what the worst religion is. I think I've developed the real belief that superstition, even if it seems benign, is going to metastasize into destructive forms, whether it becomes those destructive forms in different subsets that do brutal things, or even like the idea of exorcism. I think people have this kind of idealization of it that protects it from the critical scrutiny, where it's like, okay, people are contextualizing of their inner demons, their psychological problems, as being literal demons, and if they can have them expunged through this type of religious therapy, then what's wrong with that? Well, what's wrong with that is that people literally believe it, and then sometimes they believe that their children are literally demonic creatures, and sometimes they murder them. So you might not see the harm in a superstition at time, but it comes out, you know what I mean? And there was a time when I thought that the idea of the soul was only something that comforted people, and there was really no purpose in pressing back against people who claim that they believe there is an eternal soul residing in somebody's body that leaves it after they die and goes into an eternal afterlife. Well, now you have this concept of a soul, I think, being the primary force in reproductive rights battles, where you're arguing about cellular fetuses that don't have any higher cerebral functioning, can't have no perception of pain, have no impulses of that type. And you have people arguing that they're nonetheless ensouled, or they might not be arguing that, but they believe that, and that's the motivating force behind their legislation. So that hurts, And I remember during the Bush era, there was that pushback against stem cell research. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that seemed to be rooted in the idea that stem cells were ensouled, right? And, people kind of forgot about that, but there's still a real dysfunction now in that kind of research due to people's religious convictions. It falls back on the idea of the soul. And my dad has Parkinson's now. He's pretty developed in his Parkinson's, and this is the kind of realm that could really help people like him. So there again, you have another kind of like comforting superstition that I think has negative consequences for people. And I think superstition in all its forms is ultimately going to manifest itself in destructive forms. And people like to compare the Islamic texts against Christian texts, and try to determine which one is worse and which one is better. Yeah. It's not really helpful. It depends on who's reading it and how they practice it and how literally they believe in it. Like you can certainly find items in Christian texts that justify brutality and murder in the same ways you can find it in Islamic texts. And like I said, you also find the more peaceful sects that look at things like jihad as entirely internal, as an internal war that must be fought with oneself, in order to attain, whatever holy stature they want. So
here I am, like thinking I want to talk about like magic underwear or like a pyramid scheme with aliens or something, like the more absurd shit. And you went to like the literal, like super fucked up stuff. So yeah, I mean, I guess I didn't articulate my question very well, but you definitely answered it. I mean, I agree 100%. Oh,
I can envision benign forms of Scientology if you read the Scientology text.
Yeah.
Its problem is it's run by fundamentalists.
Yeah.
It's run by a bizarre bizarre autocrat, and David Miscavige, and it is very centralized as a corporation.
Oh yeah.
You don't find you don't find a whole lot of dissident Scientological sects, that take a more liberal interpretation. You're either with Scientology or you're not.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. What do you think?
That's great. And there you have it. That is episode number 13 with Lucien Greaves.
We'd like to say thanks to the Satanic Temple. Thanks to you listeners, and please check out our previous podcast. They're on 31G's SoundCloud, and they're also on iTunes under 31G Podcast.
And don't forget to check out Hail Satan, now streaming on Hulu. I'm sure other places. And also check out the Satanic Temple's website. Go there, make a donation, buy some merch. All of that helps keep this movement going.
Thank you, everybody. Stay tuned for the next episode.
Later.